Hi, everybody. Welcome to Baseball Discourse. I am putting this episode together on Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day. The reason I am choosing the great sportscaster Mel Allen is because Mel was born on this date, February 14th, 1913. He was one of the greatest sportscasters, renowned as the voice of the Yankees. He also broadcast All-Star games, World Series games, the Rose Bowl, football on radio and television. He had an extensive broadcasting career that came to a sudden end in 1964 when he was fired as the voice of the New York Yankees by Yankees management. And the Yankees strung the public along in 1964. They didn't say that Allen was dismissed. Instead of naming him to broadcast the World Series because the Yankees had made the World Series that season, they named Phil Rizzuto, and they kept stringing the public along until mid-December when they announced that Joe Garagiola would be the new Yankees broadcaster replacing Mel Allen. But that's the backdrop to this episode of Baseball Discourse, because in 1968, Mel Allen came to my hometown of Torrington, Connecticut, to be the guest speaker at a sports banquet held at the Knights of Columbus Hall in Torrington. Now, at the time, unbeknownst to me, Allen actually was a frequent visitor to my area of Connecticut because Mel, who also lived in Connecticut with his brother Larry, owned a soda distributorship, and that brought him on business to my area on occasion. See, even famous sportscasters had other lines of income. But just to give you a little background, here's Allen, 1968, never fully recovered as a noted broadcaster as far as getting other big-time assignments after the Yankees fired him in 1964. And during that time, the Yankees are just horrendous. After the 64 season, after they made it to the seventh game of the World Series, they just flopped. So Allen was gone. The Yankees were no longer in their glory, but obviously they still had a following, and so did Mel Allen. The people in that hall, the Knights of Columbus Hall, in February of 1968, still not only remembered Mel, but had an affinity for Mel Allen. So we're going to play Mel's talk that night. Let me give you some more background. Paul Pagano was a disc jockey at the local radio station back in 1968. And later, when I got a job there, Paul was still working, and I asked him if he still had the tape of Mel Allen, because I grew up a big Mel Allen fan. I adored Mel Allen. Hello there, everybody. This is Mel Allen. Anyway, I asked Paul if he still had the tape of Mel Allen speaking that night at the Knights of Columbus. He did. I transferred the tape from reel to cassette, and here, the talk goes on for about 30 minutes. Here is Mel, and then I'm going to tell you an interesting story afterward. But enjoy the night Mel Allen came to town.
You know, the first chance I ever had to broadcast came about while I was in law school. I never was big enough then. I was skinny. I was as tall as I am now, but as Dr. said a little while ago when they asked him about a picture, I've put on a lot of weight and all that since then, but I just suddenly got all my height, but lost all the weight that I had, and I was just as skinny as I could be. But sports announcers were not as plentiful in those days as they are today. And I was going to the University of Alabama, whose head coach was Frank Thomas, one of the first to be admitted to the Football Hall of Fame, passed away not long ago. He overlapped the Four Horsemen at Notre Dame and later was an assistant coach to New Rockne. Well, I was sort of general flunky around school. I wrote for the school paper, sports editor of the school paper, made my letter as student manager of athletics, so I got the benefit of coaching without taking all the hard knocks. Anyway, the man who was doing the university's football games in Birmingham which was 50 miles from Tuscaloosa, left to take a job at another city, and they were frantically looking around for somebody to broadcast football. And the season was to open within 10 days. Among the people that they checked was the head football coach at the university, and he gave my name because I also handled the public address system. Well, I took the audition, and I won it. I found out later I was the only one that took it. And that's a true story. And I went up to do my first broadcast. I knew the university's team by sight, but I had sense enough to learn the name to go with the number on the backs of the opposing team. I didn't know that you needed spotters, men who particularly help you spot the defensive men on plays. And I went up there all alone, sat down. The game began and I started. And I got along pretty well till somewhere midway the second quarter. Play was run by Alabama. I said, now it's Alabama's ball, second down, 5 to go on their 35-yard line. Happened to glance up at the scoreboard and had third down, 5 to go. And I couldn't figure out how in the world I'd lost a down. But anyway, while Alabama was in the huddle getting their next play, I ran one of my own into the line for no gain. I found out, though, that there are people who sit at home and listen. Of course, that happened to be in the days of radio. But there are people who sit at home, whether they're listening on the radio or watching on TV, and they keep up with things like that, and they write you letters about making up plays, you know. They write you letters anyway. I got into baseball broadcasting also by accident. I loved baseball, but you know, until the American and National Leagues expanded from 8 teams each to 10, then to 12, the 3 New York teams were the last 3 teams to broadcast their baseball games on a daily basis. And Wheaties, the sponsor, was responsible for it. But in order to crack the solid wall that the Giants, the Dodgers, and the Yankees put together, that's the only time they ever stuck together about anything, was to pay them a good hunk of money. But they needed some help. And so they got help from Mobil Oil and from Ivory Soap. But Wheaties ran it. Now, they let me take an audition because the New York games, the Giants and Yankees, were on the same station in New York to start with on CBS. And they allowed me to take the audition, although Wheaties had decided to bring in men from other cities who were doing their games and knew how they wanted them done. But they let me go ahead and take it. And when the audition was over, they liked it. And they brought a man up from Washington by the name of Arch McDonald, who broadcast the first year of the Yankees-Giants games. We used to do the home games of each team. They didn't split up till after the war, and each team go their separate ways. And one day I get a call asking me if I'd like to go to Washington to take Arch's place, that they liked my audition, and do the Senators' games. And I said I would if I could come back to New York when the season was over. You see, I had gone ahead and gotten my law degree, and I didn't want to stay in radio unless I could stay in it in New York, because after I'd finished law school, I passed the bar. I hadn't passed one since. But just about the time everything was set, the late, great Walter Johnson came by to see Clark Griffith. Mr. Griffith, who was a great man in baseball, as you all know, was passed on. He decided to let Walter Johnson broadcast the Washington baseball games. He called up and told us about it. So I was out, and I just simply stayed in New York. Well, Arch had an assistant who had been brought in. His name was Garnett Marks from St. Louis. And he did 2 innings of each game. Well, he was broadcasting the ball game. It was his turn. He did the 3rd inning, 3rd and 7th. And after the first half of the 2nd inning was over, he said, no runs, no hits, no errors, no one left on. The score at the end of an inning and a half is 0-0. They played day games then. He says, now, ladies, I'd like to have you all gather around the microphone. He said, I'd like to have a little word with you. He said, I'd like to talk to you a little bit now about ovary soap. Well, the thing is, he started laughing. He says, I mean ovary soap. He said it all over again. He just got into a rut and he couldn't get out of it. But he got out of New York. And I got a call asking if I'd like to be Arch McDonald's assistant. And I said that I would, but I sure did practice ivory soap. So I've always owed my start in baseball to Walter Johnson and ovary soap. I've had a very wonderful career in baseball, having the opportunity to be with a team that won so many pennants. They won 14 pennants in the last 16 years that I was with them. And that, doctor, gives you an idea of why, you know, some Red Sox fans didn't like me. As if to say I had anything to do with it. It's a cinch. I didn't have anything to do with it. Although I appreciate those people who say the reason they have gone down is because I left. But I can only tell you this. I had nothing to do with what happened on that field, I mean, after all. But it was a real great pleasure to see the great stars, not only on the New York Yankee team, but on the other teams as well. And the Red Sox had great teams. The greatest hitter I ever saw was Ted Williams. One of the greatest hitters that I've ever seen was Stan Musial. I did some National League games to begin with. But I was very happy to have a point proven, not by my saying so, and because of an association with the team that he represented, but by a nationwide vote of people from all over the country just this past season, naming the greatest living baseball player, and that was the Yankee Clipper, Joe DiMaggio. You see, you can get into arguments all night long. You say, well, this fella could do that better, this fella could do that better, this fella could do that better. The thing was about Joe DiMaggio, there wasn't any department in baseball in which he wasn't supreme. There was a time that he won a batting title. There was a time he won a home run title. But he didn't do that consistently. He never hit over 400. Ted Williams was the last man to do so. And by the way, it was wonderful to see the last National Leaguer to do so at the Baseball Writers' Dinner in New York recently, Bill Terry. And Bill said, "You know how long ago that's been?" I said, "No." He said, 39 years ago. And that shows you how time passes. 39 years ago that Bill Terry was the last National League player to have hit over 400. And frankly, I think Ted Williams, and Bill said so that night as we chatted, could have hit over 400 more than he did if he had gone with the pitch, gone to the opposite field, as they say. But he just loved to pull that ball, and when they'd pull that shift on him, that'd make him angrier, and he just wanted to accept the challenge. But he's a wonderful guy, and as you know, those of you who have helped him support the Jimmy Fund, he's a very charitable man. You've got to know Ted to like him. And strangely, though I've been fishing with him and been hunting with him, down here at Waterbury a couple of times for the Jimmy Fund, I was the cause of him being fined $5,000. Not really the cause, but there was a period in there, you remember, he had something going with the press. Or wasn't there a period when he didn't? In any case, at this particular time, he kept spitting at him. You remember? He used to look up to the press box and spit at him. I should say expectorate with the tape going. But I usually would ignore those things. But it did the player no good. It didn't mean anything. But it had gotten to a point where it had become a story. That is, a major story. It's just like Jimmy Pearsall. There's a lot of things Jimmy used to do, you just ignore them, you know. Except the time two fellows jumped out of the right field stands and ran after him, and Jimmy turned around and kicked one of them in the rear. Spikes open. And guess who his helper was? This is the truth. The Yankees had a runner on first base, and he outran the whole Red Sox team to the outfield to help out Pearsall. That was Mickey Mantle. I never will forget that as long as I live. But I'm getting off my subject just a little bit, but I can't help but do it when you talk about Jimmy. Pitcher looks in to get the sign. He starts to go to the wind-up, and the catcher hollers, "Stop!" And the umpires call time. And we don't know what in the world was happening. Till he looked out on the field, and suddenly there's nobody in center field. The batter was Ryan Duran, the worst hitting pitcher that ever lived. No Pearsall out in the outfield. All of a sudden, we see him peeking behind the monument. When nobody was looking, he sneaked in behind the center field monument for Ryan Duran. So the umpires, you know, come on, let's play ball. You know how it is arguing somebody making a travesty of the game. So he comes running in. Now he takes a position about 10 feet back of second base. So you still don't have a center fielder. But these things became stories, and naturally you would talk about them and kid a fellow about it. He gave you a lot of fun. He gave a lot of color to the game. But in the case of Ted Williams, before they had to bring their gloves in, by the way, it'd be fans. You know, fans are alike the world over. Some of them root for you, some will boo you. Somebody would get on Ted, call him some kind of name or whatever, and he couldn't do anything about it. But before they changed the rule, he threw his glove down just around the foul line, the way players would do in those days. He'd come running into the dugout when his team was retired. He'd come back out, and as he was reaching down for his glove, I'd hate to tell you what he called that fan. And that was his way of getting even. But anyway, this day he comes into the Red Sox dugout, and this was a story that had been developing, and he spit. And I mean, he let go a good wad. He'd been chewing some bubble gum or something, you know. I was in an open booth at Fenway Park, and I didn't realize that Ed Coyne, the great cartoonist from Boston, was sitting in front of me. Nor did I realize that Mr. Yorkie, who was not attending the game that day, was in his office in New York listening to the game, but on the New York station. And as soon as he heard me say, Williams, you know, let go, he called up Joe Cronin, who then was president of the Red Sox, and said, fine him $5,000. And the next day, here was this cartoon in the paper of me broadcasting a series of panels, and Mr. Yorkie listening to it and calling up Cronin, and so that in the newspaper, I was blamed for Ted being fined $5,000. So I had to go and explain to him how that came about. He said, you have to apologize. He said, I spit. He said, I'm just sorry I couldn't spit that far. Of course, we all liked a guy that I believe one day will make the Hall of Fame, Yogi Berra, and you've heard so many Berra stories. But one of my favorites, they told Yogi when he first came up that he had to be more aggressive. He was very quiet and shy, you know, played a period in New London, you know. He was skinny, but he had these big features, you know, and was very quiet. Anyway, my favorite story about Yogi, they're playing the Red Sox, an exhibition game down in Florida. And as you know, you like to have a pitcher work the equivalent of 3 innings first time out, strengthen the arm muscles. Vic Raschi was pitching, and Yogi was catching, and the game began. This was in 1949, Casey's first year with the Yankees. Dom DiMaggio led off, hit Raschi's first pitch to left field for a single. Johnny Pesky then came up, hit Raschi's first pitch to left center for a double. Ted Williams hit Raschi's first pitch for the center fielder's head for a triple. Vern Stevens hits Raschi's first pitch over the left field fence for a home run. The first 4 pitches of the ball game, a single, double, triple, and a homer. Casey, even though it was an exhibition game, couldn't stand it any longer, and he called time. But instead of going out to the mound to talk to Raschi to see how he was, he rushes up to home plate and says, Yogi, has Raschi got anything on that ball today? Yogi says, how the hell should I know? I ain't even had my hands on one yet. But Yogi had the tables turned on him in the 1957 World Series. The Yankees were playing the Braves, the Milwaukee Braves, and it's at Yankee Stadium. And a fellow that really is very quiet, doesn't say anything much at all. He just lets his playing do his talking for him. One of the greatest ball players and a definite potential Hall of Famer, Hank Aaron. And if I had to pick my top 3 today, it'd be Mantle, Mays, and Aaron. I hate to leave Clemente out. I mean, you know, it's pretty tough. Or Kaline, but I think that'd have to be my 3. because he makes everything look so easy. He reminds me of the time they used to argue that Terry Moore was a better center fielder than Joe DiMaggio. Terry Moore used to dig like all get out and make a catch. Joe would be standing there waiting for the ball. Well, he was taller, took longer strides, got a great jump on the ball. He was just a natural ball player. He made things easy. Tremendously well coordinated. Same way with Marty Marion. Marty Marion was, to me, one of the greatest shortstops I ever saw. Phil Rizzuto was. But Phil would tear up the ground going after a ball. Marion would be there waiting for it because he was big and tall and took these long strides. Anyway, Hank Aaron comes up to the plate, 70,000 people, very quiet fella, and Yogi's wondering what in the world he can say to distract Aaron, get his mind off that pitcher so he can't pay 100% attention to him. Aaron digs in, runners on first and second, and suddenly he noticed he had the trademark down. Well, you know, as kids, you always heard the trademark's supposed to be up. But that doesn't mean anything. These batters stand up there and they twist that bat around. When the pitcher releases the ball, they cock that bat ready to swing. The trademark can be anywhere. But Yogi said, "Hey, Hank." "What, Yogi?" "You know you got the trademark down?" "Well, Yogi, I want to tell you something. I didn't come up here to read." Joe McCarthy, who managed the Yankees and, of course, the Red Sox, never played Major League Baseball. Walt Alston did. He went to bat one time, struck out. But it's been proven that you don't have to play it to manage it. And he hated to lose. He was one guy that proved to ball players he had no other alternative except say, "Kirk, get up there and hit for the pitcher," and prayed to God. Big Kirk grabbed a bat and got up to the plate. Everybody in the ballpark knew what was going to happen. Catcher got down, signaled to the pitcher for a curve ball. Pitcher took the stretch, checked the runners leading off first and third, threw a curve. Kirk swung and missed for a strike. Another curve ball, swung and he missed, strike two. Now McCarthy's about to tear every hair out of his head. So now they're deliberately going to throw him a fastball about 3 feet outside the plate to make him chase it and strike him out, and the game will be over. They were behind 2-1. He was trying to tie the score. He says, "I'm going to put on a double steal. Maybe the big dumb ox will lay off the pitch. Maybe we can get the run home that way, and then anything in the world can happen." So sure enough, they signal for a bad waste pitch on a curveball. So the pitcher took the stretch, and he signaled for the double steal as well. Checked the runners leading off first and third, and he threw this bad curve. The runner on first broke for second. The only reason Kirk didn't swing at the ball, he couldn't reach it. He tried to. And the catcher, as he came up with the ball, saw that man running toward second. He fired the ball toward second base. With that, the runner leading off third broke for the plate, representing the potential tying run. And the infielder, seeing that, ran in, cut the ball off, and fired the ball back toward the plate to cut off that potential tying run. Big Kirk standing there, hauled off and hit the ball over the left field fence. I wish I could tell you what McCarthy told Kirk in the clubhouse. Of course, the game was over because of interference. Kirk's only answer was, "I'm sorry, Joe, but that's the only good fastball I've seen in 2 weeks." Fellows like Augie, umpires have good senses of humor as well. You've got to have a sense of humor. when you're playing the game. Because, you know, you're out there earning a living and everybody is trying to knock your brains out and you're trying to knock theirs out, figuratively speaking. I'd like to take just a moment to congratulate your club for the wonderful work that you've been doing, not because it's in the world of sports, but because you have been setting a great example for youngsters. But we've got to prepare the future for our kids. And you're the people that are going to do it. If we don't enrich their minds with knowledge, imbue their hearts with the love of truth and reverence for all things sacred and holy, then our republic must go, well, it'll simply have to go down to destruction, if I can put it that way, just as others have gone before it. And mankind must sweep through another vast cycle of sin and suffering before the dawn of a better era can arise in this world. If our youth is rightly instructed in the faith of our fathers, in the dignity of each man, then our power will be stronger than any weapon of destruction that man can devise. That was said by Herbert Hoover. And this was said by a priest. It's called a game guy's prayer. And it tends to sum up everything that you people have been doing. It tends to sum up what the world of sports in general has been doing, what people in all walks of life have been attempting to do. We've never been able to find out the identity of this priest, but he wrote a little prayer. And prayer is a great part of sports. It is a tremendous part of it. The greatest of players pray to God for help. It's called a game guy's prayer. Dear God, help me to be a sport in this little game of life. I don't ask for any place in the lineup. Play me where you need me. I only ask God for the stuff to give you 100% of what I've got. And if all the hard drives come my way, I thank you, God, for the compliment. And help me to remember that you won't let anything come, God, that you and I together can't handle. And help me to take the bad breaks as part of the game, too. Help me be thankful for them. And God, help me always to play on the square, no matter what the other players do. Help me to come clean. Help me to see, God, that often the best part of the game is helping the other fellows. And finally, God, if fate seems to uppercut me with both hands, and I'm laid up on the shelf in sickness or old age, help me to take that as part of the game also. And God, help me not to whimper or squeal that the game was a frame-up or that I got a raw deal. And when in the dusk I get the final bell, God, I ask for no lying complimentary stones. I'd only like to know, God, that you think that I've been a good guy. Thank you.
So there you have Mel Allen giving his talk that night in February of 1968 at a Hot Stove League banquet. Fast forward to 1977. I'm broadcasting for my local radio station. We broadcast a lot of high school football and basketball games, and back then it was a big deal to put those games on the local radio station. So we're going to have a banquet at the end of the year, an opportunity to honor the athletes whose games we broadcast, but also to promote the radio station. And I suggested, because I had a contact who knew Mel Allen, let's get Mel Allen as the speaker. And the radio station general manager, who obviously had heard of Mel Allen, said, gee, that's a great idea. So we bring Mel up, and he spoke, and he was okay. One of the reasons being, most of the athletes in that hall never heard of Mel Allen. And when you think about it, that made a lot of sense, because Mel was last really on the national scene in 1964. Here we are, fast forward to 1977. These kids never heard of Mel Allen. Here they are, teenagers. They were, maybe 2 or 3 years old at the time Mel Allen was dismissed. So it turned out that Mel didn't go over well. And what did that mean? Well, even if you're Mel Allen, fame is fleeting. Now let's fast forward to 1983. I am broadcasting games for the Kinston Blue Jays and also driving the team bus. I was a multitasker, and in order to get the job as a broadcaster, I had to learn how to drive the bus. I actually had experience as a school bus driver, but I had to learn how to drive a double clutch. I did. So now I'm broadcasting the games, driving the bus. So who's the first on the scene to pick up the team? Me. It's a Saturday afternoon. I'm getting ready to pick the team up to take them to the ballpark because we had a night game. Players start getting on the bus. This is 1983. This was before sports television, or for that matter, sports radio, was a big deal. And one of the biggest shows on television was a syndicated show, This Week in Baseball, hosted by Mel Allen. Mel had returned to the national scene and had developed a whole new following. One of the players gets on the bus, and he said to me, wow, I just got done watching This Week in Baseball, because it was on a Saturday afternoon before the game of the week on many stations in various markets across the country. I just watched This Week in Baseball. That Mel Allen, he's pretty good. Player never knew, never had any idea who Mel Allen was, and thought he was a new broadcaster having arrived on the scene. Mel Allen, forever known as the voice of the Yankees, a broadcaster I grew up admiring, enjoyed listening to him. You can listen to some of his games, some of his calls on YouTube. I actually interviewed Kurt Smith. That's on the channel. He wrote a biography about Mel Allen. Check it out. As I said, it's on the channel. But I idolized Mel Allen. Hello there, everybody. This is Mel Allen. How about that? I idolized Mel, and I'll always remember the night Mel Allen came to town. As always, thanks for watching and listening to Baseball Discourse.